Hello, it is IARESMART, and the Force is probably one of the most recognizable parts of Star Wars. Every kid, when you're at the grocery store, right, you've waved your hand in front of the automatic door to pretending you use the Force. Every kid did it. But the Force in Star Wars is more than just a thing that can
make things float.
There's an entire philosophy around what the Force means, and both the Jedi and Sith have their own interpretations of how to use the Force. George Lucas describes the Force in an interview somewhere, I don't really remember where he said it, but anyway, I remember him saying, it stuck with me because he described the Force as the light side being the purest form of the Force, and the dark side being a corruption of the Force that must be destroyed. However, I like the newer interpretation of the Force, specifically the one that's prompted by The Last Jedi. I know, controversial opinion, but stick with me here, okay? Basically, in this movie, it kind of more gets into the idea of the light and the dark being a balance in the Force, because that's always what they say in the movies.
Bring balance to the Force!
The balance of the Force. But that always just means getting rid of the dark side. I think it makes more sense to show the true balance between light and dark. The Last Jedi kind of builds into this point by having Luke say that the Force does not belong to the Jedi, and that when there is equal light, there must be equal dark.
That Force does not belong to the Jedi. Balance. Powerful light, powerful darkness.
And Snoke in this movie also mentions that when darkness rises, light rises to meet it. There's also this great symbol in the Ahch-To Jedi Temple that shows the light and the dark side of the Force. It very much resembles a yin and yang symbol, which you're probably familiar with. You've probably seen it before. But the Force is more than just this cool fictional thing in Star Wars movies. It can be used as a way to see and understand our own lives. And that's where my main point is in this video, because I've learned that life is all about balance.
Balance.
I'm going to get a bit existential here, but we live on a planet that is the perfect distance from the sun, has the perfect amount of oxygen in the atmosphere, has the perfect size to have the right amount of gravity, and all the perfect conditions to make it so you exist right now, at this moment. We have a certain amount of water that we must drink each day, but too much water can kill us by drowning. We have a certain amount of food we have to eat each day or we'll starve, but if we eat too much food, then we can have health problems that get caused by that. Furthermore, certain deficiencies in some foods can be catastrophic, while too much of one kind of food can also have the same effect. Basically, all of this, what I'm trying to say, is moderation, or in philosophy terms, the golden mean. Now, the golden mean is basically just a fancy thing that this guy called Aristotle came up with. You might have heard of him, he's a pretty old guy. Anyway, this guy Aristotle, right, created this idea of the golden mean in life, which describes the balance just in life and moderation. Let me give you a few examples. Aristotle defines 3 categories: deficiency, excess, and balance, right in the middle. Now, the thing is, on each line of this sort of chart is how it's usually organized. It describes different virtues that a person can have. For example, you can have cowardness or rashness, but in the middle is courage. Or you can have indecisiveness and impulsiveness, or self-control. Basically, it's a bunch of just different values, and all of what it means is that you can look at different values that a person has, and you want to try and move towards the middle as much as possible. Basically, what philosophers at the time were trying to figure out is how do you make the perfect human? What is the perfect form of a human being? And Aristotle gave his interpretation on how to achieve this, meaning you find balance in your life in different values. Now, the general idea of moderation appears in tons of different religions and philosophies. I'm just highlighting this one example because I'm personally familiar with it, and it's one I like, and I think it's understandable. For an example from my life, I've been skinny my entire life. I think you can kind of see I'm pretty skinny. And my entire life I've been told, oh, I should probably work out more, I should probably do sports or something, and I was just like, oh, I don't really care, I just want to play video games and not work out. But every time, yearly checkup, doctor would say, hey, you should exercise more, it's important, you should exercise. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I'll exercise, whatever. But I never really did that. I just always ignored it. But recently I've started to look more at that aspect of life and said, why not? Why shouldn't I? This is a deficiency in my life, and it's something I want to change, and so I did. And now every morning I make the effort to do a workout. It's not a very crazy or anything crazy, it's just some very routine workout, simple exercises that I do. Now, I'm not crazy going to the gym every day, but at the same time, I'm not just sitting around and doing nothing all day. I found this balance in my life, and something that works for me. Now, obviously that's different for everybody. Some people have, different things, but for me, I looked at my own life, looked at, the different parts of my life, and found balance.
Balance.
Another thing for me is sweets. I never really had a big problem with sweets, But it's just, I noticed at one point how many sweets I made myself available to, how much candy and pop and all that stuff, and I realized that's not really good. Like, that's the thing they tell you in school, you know, hey, don't eat so many snacks, it's not good for your health. I'm like, oh yeah, sure. But then I started thinking about them, like, yeah, I shouldn't eat so many sweets. So I've tried to reduce the amount of sweets that I make available to myself. And I just don't have it very often. I just, every once in a while, have a piece of candy, or, you know, every once in a while, have some pop. You know, I just try and reduce the amount. It's something I looked at my life and said, I want to balance this. I want to find balance in this part of my life.
Balance.
This kind of self-control where you regulate yourself can be extremely powerful once you master it, and really can just improve your overall quality of life. Also, in a more broad way of looking at it, this can also apply to your mental state, because it's said that you must have bad experience to have good experiences. You know, you must know sadness to know what happiness is. You have to have this balance. If you had only happy experiences, you wouldn't know what anything was, and if you only had sad experiences, well, that'd just be awful. You have to have these balances in your life. But what does all this mean? What does this apply to your life? Well, personally, I try and apply this idea of balance to my life in pretty much everything. Whenever I make a big decision or anything, I try to think about balance. What is going to be a balance in my life? So what's my advice to you? Don't take things at face value, and don't put all your belief into just one thing. Learn from different people with different experiences, especially those who you don't agree with. Our modern life just encourages getting into fights and debates over all sorts of things. You know, politics, sports, brands, entertainment, even which Star Wars trilogy is the best. Most people will just pick a side and stick with that side and just become more and more radical towards their point over time. Not everyone, I know it's not everyone, but it can easily happen if you let yourself. I find that the truth almost always just lies somewhere in the middle. Life is not black and white most of the time. It's gray. It's a mess. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Usually in sort of any kind of argument, politics, Star Wars, I don't know, whatever. The truth is almost always just somewhere in the middle. One point is saying something kind of correct. The other point says something kind of correct. Very, very few times I've seen an argument where there's one side that is just objectively right and the other side is objectively wrong. That doesn't happen. If people are arguing, it's because both sides have a good point. I know this all might sound kind of obvious when I say it, but how often do you actually apply that to your life? Think about the things you believe, the things you think. Why do you think them? You know, how much do you think about the other side of the opinion? Do you really do that? How often do you actually like sit down and think about what you think? I try. It's very difficult to do. I try to do it, but it's very difficult to try and rethink why you think the things you think. Are you confused? You should be. Basically, what I'm trying to say with all this is that the Force is a fictional concept from a fictional movie series. All right, it's whatever. It's a thing that makes things float and is really cool. But it has value in our own lives. Look at the habits in your own life and try and decide, are they good for you or are they causing an imbalance in your life? I've had a few very, notable moments in my life where I've stopped and looked at my life critically and tried to figure out what I'm doing, where I'm going, I'll try to understand things. And these have been great. I try to figure out, okay, I need to change this part of my life. I need to balance this part of my life. And it can be kind of difficult to be honest with yourself like that, but trust me, it is worth it. Life is just a journey. We're all walking our own paths. They're all different. We all got to find balance in different ways. Balance might mean one thing to someone and something totally different to someone else. And again, I can't tell you everything. I'm not a genius. I don't know everything. Nobody does. All right? So don't just take my word for it. Just take my advice, think on it, and go live your life. I don't know. This is a bit different than what I normally do. It's a bit more, deep philosophical. Maybe it's not deep at all. Maybe it's just surface level thinking and I'm overthinking the Star Wars Force. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I wanted to make this video for a while. It's just something I've been thinking about. Balance. It's how I think about my life. It's my personal life philosophy. And maybe it's yours too now. So go out, live your life, bring balance to the Force and to yourself. See ya.